This story is from a female. Working the closing shift always made me nervous, because I was the only employee there, and the storefront was all huge windows, and in a poorly lit parking lot. It was one of those situations where it was easy to see in but not to see out. On this one night after close, I had a weird shuddering feeling that I was being watched through the windows. I decided to flip the lights off and do the rest of my tasks in the dark, so I could feel less like I was on display. About a minute after I turned off the lights, one of those Jeeps with a lift kit and extra lights on the roof peeled out of the parking lot. I locked up and left work uneventfully. After dropping the deposit at the bank, I stopped at the 24/7 grocery store to pick up a few things. As I approached the self-checkout lane, I noticed there was a large 20-something guy sitting on the bench near the checkouts. He stood out to me because he looked really tense. He was fidgety and kept glancing side to side. He looked like he was ready to bolt out of there. Something about him really irked me, but I quickly rationalized to myself that he must be waiting for his girlfriend to get off her shift at the grocery store. I left the store and got into my car. That was when I noticed the guy from the bench walking purposefully to his own vehicle, a lifted Jeep with lights on the roof. Red flags went off in my brain, and I felt my heart in my throat. I remember thinking he didn't even get any groceries. I drove as quickly as I could back to my house. I wished that I could have parked in the garage, but it wasn't an option. I rushed into the house and felt safe, knowing my brother and dad were home. About 2 minutes later, I saw the same Jeep drive past my house. I was chilled to the bone, but I never had any encounters with the guy again. I guessed when he saw 3 other cars in the driveway with my own, he knew I wouldn't be a great target. But hey, creepy Jeepy guy, let's not meet. In 2009, when I was 17, I lived in a small gated compound. There were 3 houses in the front and 2 houses in the back with a shared swimming pool in the middle. The 2 houses in the back were bigger, and the gate to the driveway was in the same distance of the houses in the front, so our driveway was very long. The gates were 2-door styled and were controlled by a remote, but you could open one of them by hand if you push hard enough. Once through the gate of either of the big houses, you have access to everyone's backyards, front doors of the 2 big houses, and the pool. My family and I lived in one of the bigger houses, and we left one gate slightly open so our maid could come in and out. We lived in an affluent neighborhood and crime was very little or none at all. We instructed our maid to always close the gate shut so it looks like it's locked, and this one time she forgot. It was a weekday so everyone went to bed early. We lock our doors. We have metal bars to secure the sliding doors and windows downstairs as they were flimsy and easy to open from the outside. However, at around 5 a.m., I heard 3 thumps on my window. I ignored it thinking it was from somewhere else. Then shortly after, I heard my parents talking quietly in the common room upstairs, and it seemed like they were on the phone. Once again, ignored it and went back to sleep. Then a few minutes later, my mom's voice got louder, and I remember her saying, "Hurry, he has a knife." That's when I got startled and jumped out of bed immediately. By the time I was out, my parents were in their room and looking out the window into the pool area, while hiding behind the wall so they can't be seen. I went to wake up my two older brothers, whose room was across mine, and told them what I heard. You can also see the pool from their room, and when we looked out, there was a man who was running straight out of our gate, and he just kept running as far as he could from our house. After talking to our neighbors, while we waited for police, it turns out that a man broke into our compound through our gate. You could see his tracks around the compound, because he fell in the pool. After falling, he made his way into our backyard where there is a ladder going up to the rooftop, but my room was still accessible to it. He left his shoes in the bottom of the ladder, and I guess that was him thumping against my window until he realized he couldn't get in, so he went to our neighbor's house. Unfortunately, they didn't have metal bars and the man easily got into their house. He went into their kitchen, grabbed a knife and made his way upstairs where two of their young daughters slept in their own bedrooms with the doors opened. The older one, 9-10 years old, said he saw the man standing right in front of her little sister's room with a knife in his hand. I don't know how or if it's a parental feeling, but their mom said she had the feeling to check on her daughters, and that was when she opened their bedroom door and saw the man standing there. He ran downstairs with knife still in hand, fell again in the pool, and that was when he ran out. The knife was left in the bottom of the pool. When the police came, they found a stolen SUV outside our house and a bunch of different house keys and wallets that he stole from houses prior to ours. Turns out this crazy lunatic went to different houses, stole a bunch of cars and keys, and it just so happens our compound was his last hit. It creeped me out knowing that my room was his first target, and I couldn't sleep in my own room for a while. And creeped me out even more that they didn't catch him. To crazy car stealing, knife-wielding lunatic, let's not meet. I've only told this to a few people outside my family, and I only recently started talking about it. I wish I'd told someone sooner, as I discovered a coworker encountered these men as well. I work downtown standard 8 to 5 hours. Once in a while I work overtime, but not often. And not on the day this happened. It was just a couple minutes after 5 p.m. when I left work. It's just a few blocks from my office building to the train station. There are a few bars and back alleys along the walk. But the worst I've ever dealt with along there are homeless folks who get a little aggressive asking for cash. They don't bother me much. The train ride from the station downtown to the station where I park my car is about 40 minutes. If I'm lucky, I manage to get a seat and don't have to stand for the whole ride. On that day, I was lucky. More or less. I got a seat next to a window, which left the seat next to me open. At the next stop, 3 men got on. One of them sat next to me and the others sat on the seats across from me, so they were facing me. I was listening to music on my iPod, so I couldn't really hear them. I did notice, however, that the guy sitting next to me was trying to move closer to me on the seat. He would move close enough that his leg was touching mine, so I'd scoot away and he'd move closer again. Eventually, I was pressed right against the window and had no doubt that he had more than a few inches of free space on his other side. I was wearing sunglasses and could surreptitiously glance at them. I'd noticed that they would occasionally say something and then all look at me. It was incredibly creepy and uncomfortable. I was nervous about getting off at my stop, but mine is the second to last on the train line. So when the train pulled into my station, I got off. The guy sitting next to me tried to grab my arm, but I was moving quickly and was able to get out. I was hoping they wouldn't get off the train there. It was a busy station, and they couldn't know where I was parked. They did. I guess it was their luck that they targeted me. I park in the furthest lot from the station, because the parking there is free. It's about a 7-minute walk, which isn't usually too bad, but my lot tends to be pretty quiet, and I was really worried about those guys following me. As a bit of background, I was fat, I work an office job, and I was sitting all day and not working out. Add to that my strong sweet tooth, and you've got a recipe for bad body. I was about 30 pounds overweight, and probably couldn't run more than 30 seconds. I was crossing the bridge over the road from the station to the parking lots when I noticed the 3 guys less than 10 feet behind me. I wasn't carrying a knife, though I do own a legal size knife, nor any pepper spray, because it's illegal in my Canadian city. I know a little bit about personal protection though, so I put my car key and my house key between my fingers so if I needed to hit someone it would hurt them, at least a little. The guys followed me across the main lot. They didn't hide the fact that they were there, and the more nervous I was, the louder they laughed. I managed to get across the road between the lots before they got to the road. They had to wait for a couple cars to pass before they could cross. I was almost halfway across the lot when they crossed the road. I started to run. I could hear their feet pounding pavement behind me. I used my clicker to unlock my car when I got close. I wrenched the door open, so glad there was no one parked next to me. I had barely closed my door and slammed the lock when the guys reached my car. They were banging on my windows and yelling, jeering. I'd never been so afraid in my life. I was worried they'd break the windows and get in. There was a guy at the back banging on the back of my hatchback, so I couldn't reverse out of my spot without running him over. I should have, but I was afraid and not thinking. I was screaming, but no one was around to hear me. I didn't know what they wanted, but I knew it wasn't anything good. I wished I had the screamer my mom had given me for protection, but it needed a new battery, so I didn't bring it with me. That thought, the one about the screamer, made me realize I had something even better. When you're being assaulted, you're not supposed to scream for help. No one wants to help. You scream fire, because everyone wants to watch the blaze. So I turned on my car alarm. It was incredibly loud in my car, so loud I thought I would go deaf, but it had the reaction I wanted. The guys started backing off. I saw people walking into the lot looking in the direction of my car. People could see what was going on. The guys took off back towards the train station. I drove home. The next night, I started working out. I have worked out almost every day since then. If those cars hadn't been in the road at that time, if I'd run just a little slower, if I'd been too slow clicking the lock, it all could have ended so much differently. I've lost 20 pounds since then, and have gained a great deal of muscle. I quit my job. I've had anxiety issues for years, and this encounter made it so much worse. I never want to feel that powerless again.
I don't know about you guys, but clowns are just fucking creepy. I don't see how anyone can find these guys cheerful or entertaining. I mean, yeah, they tell jokes and act like clumsy oafs, but that still doesn't cover up the fact that these painted smiles and creepy-ass faces are disturbing to look at. There's gotta be some actual scary clown encounters in the real world, right? I mean, I don't see how there can't be. So therefore, I have a small collection of them for you tonight. Here are 5 real, scary encounters with clowns that will make you shiver. Okay, so I made an account just so I could post this story. I've had a lot of weird shit happen to me in my life, but this was downright the most frightening thing that has ever happened to me. I will try to be as descriptive as possible. As a backstory, I live in Miami, Florida, with my boyfriend. However, I grew up in Naples, Collier County, to be exact, and that is where the rest of my family lives. We go there for major holidays and birthdays to visit. So last Thanksgiving, we decided we would take our then 2-month-old daughter with us on our trip so my family could see her. We left around 12:30 p.m. to head there, which would put us there at about 2:30, depending on traffic. We figured we would leave before 8 p.m. We were new parents, and that was the first time we had ever driven anywhere far with her. Well, one thing leads to another, and we end up staying way past 8, and instead we leave somewhere between 11 and 11:30. The only positive thing about leaving that late is that there would be no traffic, and Alligator Alley would be pretty much empty. The negatives are that there are literally no lights for most of the drive, and you can't see what is beyond your headlights. So if you broke down, it would be pretty terrifying in the pitch black in the middle of the swamp. That is always my fear when I make that drive. My family told us we could crash there, but we didn't have anything for overnight, and the drive should be less than 2 hours, since there isn't any traffic. So we put our daughter in the car seat, dreading the drive back, and thankfully she passes out instantly. My boyfriend is driving, and we're about 30 to 45 minutes in, and he looks at me and says, "Babe, I'm really tired. Do you think you could take over?" My boyfriend hates my driving, so I know he wouldn't ask me to drive unless he was really tired. Plus he drove on the way there, so I didn't mind at all. I told him to pull over at the next rest area, and I would take the wheel. So he keeps driving, waiting for a rest area sign, and as we're driving, I'm talking to him to keep him awake. We end up seeing a sign that says, "Rest area ahead." So he says he's going to pull into that one when we get there. Well, as we are talking, our daughter wakes up and we hear her cooing and making different sounds in the back seat. Then the next thing you know, she rips one and takes this big wet shit. I mean, you could really hear it. Then she starts crying hysterically. So we're both like, great, now we have to change her. But it wasn't really a big deal because we were pulling up to the rest stop anyways. It would just take a little longer. Now, to paint a picture for you, it wasn't a rest stop that had buildings with bathrooms and vending machines. There are a lot of them like that out there. This one was basically just a long parking lot with one row of empty parking spaces, which basically just looped back onto the road. Really simple, nothing much to it. The parking spaces face out to the woods or swamp. The only thing separating the woods from the parking spaces was a tall metal fence that stretched only to the end of the parking spaces. So he pulls into the last parking spot just before the fence ends, and we both get out, leaving the car and headlights on. He goes to the passenger side, and I go to the back seat to change the baby. I take her out of her car seat and sit in the back, changing her diaper. Meanwhile, she is screaming at the top of her lungs. I finally finish changing and get her to calm down, and I walk her around the car back to her car seat. Her car seat is on the passenger side, behind where my boyfriend is now sitting. So I'm crouching over, buckling her in, and I hear my boyfriend in a really confused voice go, "What in the fuck is that? Babe, get in the fucking car, now!" He is literally the hardest person to scare, so to hear his voice that way got my attention. So I stand straight up from my crouching position and look in front of us. My heart literally sank. There is a big, fat clown on the other side of the fence where my headlights are shining. The top of his head looked bald, and he had bright red hair sticking out the sides of his head. He had really creepy face paint on. He even had a red clown nose. And it looked like there was something splattered across his costume. He was standing there silently, his face pressed up against the fence to the point where his skin was seeping through the holes, and he was smiling the creepiest fucking smile I have ever seen in my life. Sheer terror came over me, and I yell out something along the lines of "holy shit," and slam my daughter's side door. I run around the back of my car, my heart racing a mile a minute. The clown lets out the creepiest laugh I have ever heard, and he starts shaking the fence violently. And then he starts walking towards the end of the fence, slowly, like he was going to come around. As he is walking, he starts singing "Rockabye Baby" while gliding his fingers across the fence. The way his voice sounded while he was singing, it was so chilling. I can't describe it. It was a really low-toned, shaky, psychotic clown voice. I am assuming he sang it because he heard my daughter crying, but who knows? I jump into the driver's side after what feels like forever, even though the whole thing probably lasted 15 seconds, and lock all the doors. I'm literally shaking throughout my body, running on pure adrenaline. My boyfriend is in my ear saying, "What the fuck? What the fuck? Let's get the fuck out of here!" This clown is now on our side of the fence, right in front of us. As I throw my car in reverse, he starts beating his hands on the hood of my car, now screaming something I couldn't make out, because I was in pure nope mode. My boyfriend is even yelling, "If it gets in front of the car, just run it over!" So I was fully prepared to do so. But he didn't. I sped out of there like a bat out of hell. I looked in my rear view, and the creepy-ass clown is just standing there in the middle of the rest area waving us off. We got onto the main road, and I was driving faster than I have ever driven in my life. We were so stunned and traumatized by the whole ordeal that all we could manage to get out was, "What just happened?" for the remainder of the ride. We still speculate what it is he was doing out there at 12 a.m. dressed like a clown in the middle of the Everglades on Thanksgiving night. We considered he was trying to fuck with people, but you would need some serious balls to pull that kind of stunt out there in the Everglades. People that live around there don't mess around. I truly believe that in the way he was singing and screaming, that he was absolutely out of his mind. I don't have any other explanation. It gives us goosebumps to this day, almost a year later, trying to answer the question of what his intentions were. And what terrifies me the most, and gives me chills even now as I'm typing this, is the fact that we were parked there for at least 10 minutes, while I was in the back seat changing my 2-month-old child, being watched by some psycho dressed as a clown. I always wonder how long he was watching. The world is full of crazy people. Living in Miami, I really thought I had seen it all, but I was wrong. Needless to say, this Thanksgiving, we're staying at home. This is kinda short, but I think it fits here. My name is Anthony, and I am 20 currently. I live on my own nowadays, but when I was a kid, my family lived in a really nice home. We had a big backyard, and it was connected to a huge field of brush, and other cool plants such as bamboo. It's normal to see people walking their dogs along the trails here. Anyway, one day me and my little brother were hanging out in the backyard, and we decided to go play a game that our older brother had made up. We basically would climb to higher areas of a closed storm drain, drop rocks down, and yell at each other when we could hear the rock passing through our designated post. If the rock made it all the way to the bottom, we would grow excited, and of course, we were winners that time. Well, since it was just me and my little brother, we didn't have enough people to run every post. Instead, we decided to run the bottom two. It meant less running up and down the steep hill anyway, so it really didn't bother me. We played for a little while, and during one of our timeouts, I remember looking up into the field and seeing something that sort of creeped me out. It was a man, or a woman. I think it was a man, but I was young and wasn't thinking about the gender specifically. Dressed up as a clown, walking around with a big grin on their face. And the creepiest part was that the damn thing waved at me. My brother and I calmly returned inside. I asked him if he saw what I saw, and he replied, "I think so." We moved out 3 years later, but we never saw the clown in the fields ever again. As strange as this experience was, I never really feared playing in the fields after this. I just remember thinking, what the heck? Part of me wanted to believe that I didn't actually see anything. And to this day, I wonder what the hell a clown was doing, walking around the fields. I posted this story once before in a lot less detail in a different thread, but never here. It is 100% true. It happened back in the late 1980s, when I was home one summer on break from college. About 2 years prior, my dad had purchased an old house, with the intention of eventually tearing it down to build a new home. The house was built in 1916, and like most homes built in that era, it had a really unconventional floor plan. There was a central living room and kitchen like any normal home, but the 3 bedrooms were more akin to separate apartments. Each had its own separate outside entrance, a private bathroom, and a door that led to the common area, living room, and kitchen. Perhaps the place was originally intended to be a boarding house or something? I really don't know. The other thing that was a little creepy about the house was that it was all wood. The ceilings, walls, and floors were all brown, and nothing was ever painted or plastered. My dad was a pretty cool guy. While he was waiting for permits and financing, he let 3 of my friends live there for free in exchange for watching the place. They had a lot of parties, but Dad didn't care as long as none of the neighbors complained. I went to a few parties there myself, when I was lucky enough to be home from college. Eventually 2 of my friends moved out, leaving my one buddy there to watch the mostly empty house on his own. He was not the type of person to be afraid of living alone in a half-empty house, so he was fine with the situation. I'm at home one afternoon when the phone rings. It's my buddy, and he sounds terrified. He tells me to call the police and to meet him out in front of the driveway of the house, but under no conditions go in. I ask him why, and he tells me that there is a crazy clown in the house. Apparently he was sick with the flu in bed for the previous 2 days. When he finally felt well enough to go into the kitchen to get something to eat, he runs face to face with a crazy woman dressed in a clown suit and makeup who starts screaming at him. It was then that he ran out of the house and called me in a panic from a nearby gas station. I called the police and then drove over to the house, which was about 2 miles away. I find my buddy on the sidewalk out front, and he's really shaken up. I asked him to describe what he saw, and he keeps saying that there is a crazy clown woman in the house. I ask for more specific details, and he describes her as dressed in a white clown suit with red makeup smeared all over her face. He is still a little sick, so he looks really bad, and honestly, he is really freaking me out as well. There was no way in hell that I was going to go into that house to investigate his story. After what seems like an eternity, a cop shows up. My buddy tells him the same exact story. The cop then goes into the house while we wait outside. After about 5 minutes, he emerges, escorting a crazy clown woman who looks exactly as my friend described her. She has wild, unkempt brown hair, and is wearing this weird baggy one-piece all-white body jumper suit. What was really disturbing though is her face. She had a tube of lipstick which she crudely spread all over her cheeks in a failed attempt, I suppose, to make them look rosy. Although we were both freaked out, the cop thought it was hilarious. The clown woman claimed it was her house, and then accused us of being on drugs and trespassing on her property. When the cop told her to get in the back of his squad car, she warned him that she had powerful friends in Tinseltown who would have him fired. When he comes back to talk to us, he tells us he can't arrest her for breaking and entering because the house is half abandoned. He said the best he could do was drive her a few blocks away and hope that she doesn't wander back. This, of course, freaks us out even more. Fortunately, though, when they run a background check on her, it turns out she has an outstanding warrant and would be going to jail instead. This is the last time we saw her. When we go back into the house, we find all kinds of crazy stuff written on the kitchen cabinets and the same red lipstick she rubbed all over her face. There was also some 10-day-old fish in the fridge that my friend never got around to eating that she cooked on the stove and ate. The really scary thing, though, was that this crazy woman was in the same house with my friend for at least a day while he was sick and semi-delirious in bed with a fever. She was probably harmless, but who knows what she would have done if she stumbled upon him while he was sleeping. His door was unlocked the entire time. Fortunately, she never did as far as we know. One of the things she wrote on the cabinets in lipstick was her name. While I'm not allowed to disclose it here, I googled it and found a mugshot that was taken of her some years later.